Hey everybody, welcome back. My name is Elise and this is 10 to Life, where we talk all things true crime. We talk about the good, we talk about the bad, we talk about the ugly. We also sometimes will even talk about the conspiracy. We talk about it all. So if you are brand new stopping by for the first time, I hope you enjoy today's video. And if you do, and you want to follow along with the channel and the new videos that I post, make sure you hit that subscribe button below. And for all of the returning subscribers out there, thank you for coming back and watching with me today. So happy to always have you guys here and your ongoing support. So the case that we're talking about today is one that happened relatively recently, within the last few years. And it's not only extremely mysterious, but there are so many red flags in this case, guys. And you know, I'm always counting my red flags. So we are going to talk about it because I am so interested to know what you guys think about this and get your thoughts on this case because there are a lot of different layers to it.
10 to Life with Elise starts right now.
This case takes us back to 2015, and it takes place in Tennessee. And on July 26th, 2015, at approximately 4 p.m., two fishermen were just going down the water, just minding their own business, and they stumble across a body face down floating in the water. This woman appeared to be very young in age. She was wearing a black top and hot pink shorts. Now, what's also interesting to note about this weekend is it was Wakefest weekend, and Wakefest weekend is a huge weekend in which droves of people come out and they bring their boats, they go on their friends' boats, they're drinking, they're partying, they're floating, they're wakeboarding. It's just a party weekend where everybody's listening to music, having some drinks, having some fun, and, playing on the water. So it was supposed to be a really fun weekend. Tons of people come out, but now there is a young woman, floating in the water. So what was supposed to be one of the best weekends of this young woman's life turned out to be a complete nightmare for her family. When officers arrived on the scene, some of them became immediately suspicious of the circumstances. However, this death of this young woman was ruled as an accident. But was it really an accident, or was this a murder that was disguised as an accident? And if it was, in fact, a murder, who was responsible, and how did they go for so long without getting caught? And we're going to get into all those details, but first we are going to have a quick word from today's sponsor. Okay guys, so it is a brand new year, and one of my resolutions has been to get my finances on track. I tell myself I'm going to do it every year. I never do it. Then I do my taxes. Then the year is ending and I'm like, okay, next year, and I never do it. So this year it is going to be my year. And as luck would have it, I discovered Truebill. Truebill is an all-in-one finance platform that not only helps you save more, but spend less, which I definitely need help in that department. I need to spend less. It's like having your own personal finance manager who's helping you monitor your credit score, who's helping you lower bills, who's helping you save money. I mean, it's amazing. They also can help you manage your subscriptions, which I am so guilty of every single time I download an app, I subscribe. So this is absolutely essential for me. With the subscriptions, they safely identify what subscriptions are on a reoccurring cadence. And so it shows you all of these subscriptions, and literally all you have to do is boom, tap, and you're unsubscribed, which has saved me a tremendous amount of money. It's also already helped me put a budget in place for the year. It monitors all of my spending by category, and then it gives me a notification, like a little gentle reminder, like, hey, you're exceeding your budget here, girl. So it's helped me just kind of really visualize what my income is versus what's going out and just look at it by monthly, by quarter. And with that, as I'm paying all of these bills and keeping on track, it monitors my credit score, which is going up, which I love. If you're like me and you're always trying to manage your finances and get in a better place financially, which we all should be doing that. We should all be striving for improvement. You can try this out for free. All you have to do is head to truebill.com/10tolife and boom, you are set. Or even easier, all you have to do is click that link in the description box below. So, guys, it's completely risk-free. You can try it for free. Don't just listen to what I have to say. Try it for yourself because I promise you are going to find it so incredibly helpful like I have. I have been searching for a platform like this for so long, and every other one has these hidden agendas and hidden things, and this one doesn't. So, guys, don't even take my word for it. Just go and check it out yourself. Try it risk-free. Try it for free. Thank me later. Thank you, Truebill, for helping my bag, helping my wallet, and for sponsoring today's video. And thank you to all of you viewers for understanding that sponsors are essential to the channel if we want to grow it to a place where I can give you more true crime all the time. All right, guys, go get that money. Lauren Agee is a 21-year-old sophomore in college. She was studying criminal science and really wanted to pursue a path and a career in, the mysterious field of criminal justice and true crime and everything that rolls into it. She was your typical 21-year-old, fun-loving, dancing, party, fun girl. All around had a bubbly personality and it just enjoyed being with her friends, enjoyed laughing, and was very outgoing. The weekend of July 24th, 2015, Lauren went up to Wakefest in Tennessee with her childhood friend named Hannah Palmer. Hannah was driving Lauren's car, and on the drive, they were taking selfies, they were having fun, listening to music, just really excited for the weekend ahead. Joining them that weekend was Hannah's boyfriend, Aaron Lilly, and his friend, Christopher Stout. Now, Lauren hadn't met Christopher before. This was going to be the first time they were meeting, but she was excited to hang out with all of them. It was going to be the four of them. They had some other friends that were going to Wakefest that they were going to meet up with, but that was the four of them who were going to stay at the same campsite and really be attached to each other for the weekend. Now, Lauren's mom, Sherry Smith, wasn't super excited about the idea of Lauren going to Wakefest just because, again, it can be a little dangerous. People are operating boats, you're swimming, you're in the water, there's lots and lots of alcohol. So she wasn't super thrilled about it, but ultimately she said, Lauren's an adult, she can make her own decisions. Plus, Lauren originally had even planned to come back just one day later because she had plans to go with her boyfriend Chase to a party that evening. So she was only going to go for, a day and a half, and then return home, and it would all be fine. However, Lauren never went to that party with her boyfriend Chase. Lauren ended up going to the lake, and she never returned. After getting to the lake, the four friends end up setting up their campsite, and they set up this campsite on a cliff, a literal cliff. One side of this cliff had a 30-foot drop and the other side of the cliff had a 90-foot drop. Now, you could only get to this cliff by boat or canoe. You couldn't drive there. That's how challenging it was to get there. And in a video that Lauren had even taken to show her friends, you can hear Hannah in the background saying, "Oh, we're going to a death trap."
In a canoe. It's a cliff on both sides. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. We're going into a death trap.
I mean, this huge cliff, and that's where they decided to camp. Now, call me crazy, and I'm not one that claims to be a wilderness person by any means. I don't love the great outdoors. First of all, it'd be hard-pressed to find me camping in a tent in general, no less on a cliff. But these kids wanted to do it. They were going there for the fun weekend and they wanted to camp on this cliff. So the plan was for Hannah and her boyfriend Aaron to camp inside this tent, and then Chris and Lauren were going to sleep in the hammocks at this campsite. Now, first of all, and I have a couple issues here. First of all, a hammock on a cliff. A tent on a cliff is one thing. A hammock on a cliff is entirely different. I mean, you could not pay me enough to do that. That sounds extremely scary. So they definitely had more balls than I do. But what was weird about this too is Lauren has a boyfriend. So I'm not sure why she was sharing a hammock with Chris, especially because it was the first time they even were getting to know each other. But it could have just been a simple fact of these were the lodging circumstances. They didn't have an extra tent. It was going to be platonic. Who really cares? So in any event, Hannah and Aaron were going to stay in the tent, and then Chris and Lauren were going to stay in the hammocks on this cliff. Well, the next day, on July 25th, around 10 or 11 p.m., Lauren texts her friend Jade saying that she's not having a good time and that she wanted Jade to come and pick her up. Jade tried to call her to see what was going on, but she had no cell service. The calls weren't going through because there was such little reception at the lake, so Jade ends up texting Lauren saying she'll try to figure out if she can come pick her up, but she's not sure because not only the distance, but also the time it was. As Lauren is waiting to hear back from Jade, she's at the bar with Hannah, her boyfriend Aaron, and his friend Chris. And while at the bar, Lauren runs into a friend of hers named Evan. They get to talking, and she tells Evan that she's staying at a nearby cabin, yet she wasn't staying at a cabin. She was camping in that hammock. So why she told Evan she was staying in a cabin, who knows? Maybe she was embarrassed. Maybe she didn't want to say that they were camping or roughing it. But she says, yeah, we're staying in a nearby cabin. At approximately 2 a.m., Lauren was seen leaving the bar with Hannah, Aaron, and Chris. Officer Yarchuk was an off-duty cop who also happened to be working as a security guard for Wakefest weekend. He was inside that bar and spotted Lauren as she was leaving with her group of friends as last call concluded. But what had happened to that earlier text that Lauren had sent Jade, where she was saying she wasn't having a good time? Now she's leaving with her friends. Is it just because she's going back to the campsite and wants to go to sleep? Was she still not having a good time with them? Was there maybe an argument or a rift or something going on between her and her friends? Because the next time Lauren was seen was when she was face down in the water in that cove. So what happened between leaving that bar at 2 a.m. with 3 friends of hers to then ending up face down in the water floating? And more importantly, who was responsible? Ryan Melanson, an off-duty officer, was the first on that crime scene with Officer Yarchuk. They followed the 2 fishermen out to that cove to the scene of this horrible crime. And within minutes of Lauren's body being found in that secluded cove, Aaron and Chris were there, and they were paddling towards Lauren's body, shouting that their friend was missing and asking if that was a woman's body. And the 2 officers noted that Chris and Aaron were acting extremely different. They reportedly seemed extremely nervous and also had no sympathy or actual concern for that young woman and if it was in fact Lauren. And it seems very calculated that they would go straight towards the scene where these officers are, where these fishermen just found this body at the exact same moment when the officers had shown up. Officer Melanson said that when they went up the cliff with Aaron and then returned down, Aaron had an entirely different look and different demeanor. And he says that by the time they got down the cliff, Aaron's face had changed so much and he had a look on him that looked as though he was not going to get caught. So the officers bring the boys into their pontoon boat because they want to start questioning them and start figuring out who this girl was, what could have happened to their friend, and how they got to this point. So Officer Melanson starts with Chris, and he really starts getting Chris just talking about his life. Now what's really weird is Chris just kind of blurts out that for work, he works with amputated body parts. Which, okay, if that's what you do for work, fine, but it seems kind of an odd thing to just directly say and in such kind of a cavalier way when you are also discussing a deceased body that was floating nearby recently that happens to be your friend. So he just kind of blurts that out. Chris also tells Officer Melanson that he and Lauren had sex. Now, why would you, it's a weird thing to say in itself when you're having questions about who this woman is, your friend, and you're talking about life and all these things. Like, why do you need to say that, first of all, unless you're trying to explain why your DNA may turn up at a possible crime scene or on a possible victim? Why else would you just kind of blurt that out and say that when you are talking to the officers? Just a very personal thing to say. Anytime Chris would start to go into deep conversation with the officer, Aaron would just look at him and hit him and tell him to shut up. At one point, Chris was looking at Officer Melanson and looking at the firearm that he had on his hip. And when Officer Melanson asked Chris, like, hey, what are you looking at over there? Chris said to him, I'm thinking about how I'm going to get that gun off your hip and get off this boat. Officer Melanson said, well, sorry, that's not going to happen. And then apparently 10 minutes later, Chris said that again to him. So Chris wanted off that boat. He was telling the officer, which why would you ever tell the officer this? He was telling the officer that he was trying to think of how he was going to get his firearm to get himself off the boat. Not really something an innocent person necessarily would say. Was he worried that he was going to be questioned and then taken into custody? Was he feeling some sort of guilt for what happened and that's why he wanted the firearm and wanted to get off the boat? It's just not statements or behavior, in my opinion, that an innocent person would necessarily have. So Chris and Aaron end up giving their official statements to the officers. And we'll start with Chris's statement. And you can see here that he says, last night, the girl came to our campsite for a few minutes saying she was going back to her ex-boyfriend. Hung out very shortly, then I fell asleep and woke up and she was gone. It looks like here it says back to her ex this morning, and he said she came back after we left and was trying to get with me the night after we had seen her at the campsite. Said she was trying to keep something out with him in front of his new girlfriend. Then he walked away. So a couple of things with this, first of all. First of all, the statement is very kind of just like foggy and weird and doesn't seem like a real clear indication of what took place that night or earlier that morning. But also, he's not referring to Lauren by name. He's referring to her as the girl and she, not ever attaching a personal name to her. And he knew her name. He was sharing a hammock with her. Even though he only met her for the first time, he knew her name. So to be giving a statement being like the girl, to me, feels like maybe disassociation to some degree. But what do you think? And then Aaron gives his statement. And here he says, Lauren I saw last when we were coming back from the bar with our group. She had cried about her ex-boyfriend, who I saw the next morning, and had said she tried to make a move on him, and he refused and said he last saw her going to the houseboat and was last seen by me, I would say around midnight, before Hannah and I got into bed in our tent at the campsite. So he's saying that night at the bar when Lauren was, apparently not having a good time texting her friend Jade, that she was crying over her ex-boyfriend because he was there with another girl, and that she tried to make a move on him and he refused. And then she decided to kind of wander off to the houseboat on her own. And then he went to bed with Hannah. But then Chris says that when he went to sleep, he and Lauren were both in that hammock together, and that Lauren had mentioned going to see her ex-boyfriend, but that when he fell asleep, she was still in the hammock next to him. But he says that he didn't feel her leave the hammock. He didn't feel her get out of it, but that at some point she must have gotten out. However, if anybody is familiar out there with these E&O hammocks, you will 100% feel if somebody is getting in or out of that hammock. It is very, very sensitive. And so you would absolutely, in my opinion, you would absolutely feel if somebody was either getting out of the hammock or if somebody was climbing on it. And they are so sensitive, in fact, that you oftentimes feel like you're going to completely just flip over or start spinning. It kind of it's a netting that kind of cocoons around you a little bit. And so you don't fall out while it's cocooned around you. But if somebody gets in, they have to kind of peel it back on either side to then crawl in. So you would absolutely feel it. So if she did, in fact, get out of that hammock at any point by herself, it's hard to believe that he didn't feel it. At least in my opinion, it's very hard to believe. So then the officers, of course, decide they need to also talk to Hannah. They need to talk to Lauren's friend because she was one of the last known people to be with Lauren at that bar and at the campsite. So they go and speak with Hannah. Hannah says that she woke up and immediately asked Chris where Lauren was. Chris tells her that she must have gotten up a while ago but didn't feel her get out. And Hannah was apparently immediately concerned because she said that Lauren left her flip-flops, her purse, and her cell phone. So if she were going off somewhere or going to meet someone, she would have brought those things with her. Now, Officer Yarchuk is the one who spoke with Hannah right after Lauren's body was found, and he describes Hannah's demeanor as being extremely flustered, but not in a devastated way. And then Hannah gives her official statement. And Hannah says, last night we were at Pates Ford Marina. We got in the canoe to go home, in parentheses, the cliff. We got to the top and we all went to lay down for bed. Me and Aaron were in the tent. Lauren and Chris were in the hammocks. When we woke up this morning, Lauren was gone, but all of her stuff was still at the campsite. We thought she might be at Wakefest, but she wasn't there. We immediately went to the campsite when coming back to the dock. She wasn't there still, but her stuff was. I went to see if she might have been at the Pates Ford bar, and I saw that policemen were headed to our campsite area. So she's saying, too, that she got up, she didn't know where Lauren went, and that they even thought she might be at the bar, but they saw police coming to the campsite, and that's why they didn't go and check the bar. However, after waking up and realizing that Lauren wasn't there, and the suspicious circumstances of all of her belongings being left behind, the group of friends never went to get help. They never went to go find this ex-boyfriend or find a friend or go to the bar. In fact, they never went to go get help. Instead, they continued to go to Wakefest and say, we thought she maybe went to Wakefest and we didn't see her there. So if you're on a cliff that high, and if your friend is missing in the morning and leaves behind her cell phone and her belongings, especially like her shoes, wouldn't you immediately go into panic mode looking for your friend, trying to make sure that everything was okay, not just go to Wakefest and to go party? Chris told police, it almost feels like I'm a suspect right now, and I know you guys are just doing your job. So Chris seemed to be highly sensitive and on high alert here. He was already kind of spilling his story. Then he was saying he wanted to get off the boat. Now he's saying, I feel like I'm a suspect, but I get it. You're just doing your job. Seems like something's eating at Chris a little bit. And I just want to go back to that statement that Chris gave again, because remember, he kept referring to Lauren as the girl, she, never called her by her name, never once referenced Lauren. And I just can't, it sticks with me because it feels like such a tactic of disassociation, but also, even though he had just met her, he, remember, told the officer that they had sex, that he and Lauren had sex, whether that was true or not. He said that. So it's like, if you just had sex with this girl, why are you still referring to her as that girl or she? There's just something very telling, to me at least, in that. So all of the friends at one point or another try to make it a point really about the ex-boyfriend being there, whether they're trying to make that the reason as to why Lauren may have wandered off, or if they're trying to loop the ex-boyfriend in as though maybe he has some responsibility in what happened. They really are trying to make a point of this. And this ex-boyfriend who was there did have a new girlfriend, and although there apparently were a couple tense moments or two between the exchanges, reportedly it never went any further than that. And there was nothing to suggest that he had done anything to Lauren or that he had anything to do with what happened. Lauren's mom and stepdad immediately went to the hospital after an officer had showed up at the house to let them know that there had been an accident. Once they arrived at the hospital, the officers let them know that Lauren unfortunately didn't make it and that it was believed to be an accidental cliff jumping accident. An autopsy report suggested that Lauren, who had been drinking pretty heavily, must have slipped off the cliff from that campsite and fallen into the water. The report also noted blunt force trauma at the head that was consistent with a fall and possible drowning. However, Lauren's mom, Sherry, did not seem to think that this was possible. She didn't think it was likely and said that this is nothing that Lauren would have ever done. She wouldn't have ever gotten so drunk that she would slip off a cliff or even try to cliff jump like people were suggesting, saying that people often jump from the cliff into the water and she must have just jumped and hit her head. She was saying that this doesn't make sense, and so she decided to do some investigating of her own. The following week, Lauren's mom began asking for friends and different people if they had any photos or videos of people cliff jumping from this cliff, and nobody had any. Nobody had any footage, any photos of people doing this because apparently it just wasn't a thing. And in those written police reports, there was also no mention of any cliff jumping, no cliff jumping activity whatsoever. So it's still unknown where that officer at the hospital and the autopsy report got the cliff jumping suggestion, perhaps one of the friends, or was that just the conclusion that they reached based on the circumstantial evidence that they had at the time. After Wakefest was over, and it was the same night that Lauren's body was found, Chris posted on Instagram, and he posted a photo of him, Hannah, and Aaron, the three of them, without Lauren, and he captioned this, "Best weekend ever," and then he later changed the caption to, "Wakefest 2015 went pretty good this year, met some new friends that made it awesome." First of all, why would this be the best weekend ever, first of all, when your friend and somebody who you admittedly slept with was found dead just that morning? A friend who you were sleeping in a hammock with, a friend that you reportedly slept with, and now you're posting on Instagram that it was the best weekend ever? That's a huge red flag. Also, just on like a level of being another human being, somebody who you were just with died and you're posting on Instagram, period. It's just so insensitive and, again, just such a red flag. Who does that? Like, what is with this guy? Wouldn't that be one of the worst weekends of your life? Or even if you're not going to post that it was the worst weekend of your life, don't post at all. But the fact that you're posting a picture of the three of you without Lauren saying the best weekend ever and met some great friends, it just screams red flag to me. And as if that weren't a big enough red flag, all three of the friends decided not to show up to Lauren's funeral. And that got Lauren's mom, Sherry, questioning what really happened. Why is this childhood friend Hannah not at my daughter's funeral? Why are these other people who she was with that weekend not at her funeral? What's really going on here? Officer Melanson called Lauren's mom after the funeral, and he told her that he did not feel Lauren's death was accidental, although he didn't have any proof indicating otherwise. A few months later, the DeKalb County Police Office closed the case and a medical examiner ruled Lauren's death as accidental. And the report says that Lauren fell from a cliff, landed on the rocks, and then rolled into the lake. Sherry was given Lauren's belongings back, but a couple key items were missing from her belongings. Her sleeping bag was missing, and pieces of her clothing were missing. So none of this was sitting right with Lauren's mom, Sherry. She knew that things weren't adding up. She knew that there was weird behavior. So in February 2016, she decided that she was going to hire a PI. So Lauren's mom, Sherry, hires a private investigator by the name of Sheila Wysocki, and she decides she's going to let Sheila do her own investigation. Now, Sheila is a PI known for solving the murder of a friend when police weren't able to. So she has done this before, and she has some credibility behind her name. She digs for facts, and she gets to the bottom of it. And since solving her friend's murder, she's taken on a ton more cases. Sheila is a very fierce advocate for justice, and she has dedicated so much of her time to find out what actually happened to Lauren. One of the first things she notices about Lauren's case is in her autopsy photos, and she notices the hemorrhaging around Lauren's neck. Now, you do not get this kind of hemorrhaging with a fall. Something had to have been put around Lauren's neck to get those marks. There was also a possible bite mark on Lauren's chest. And Sheila also noted that there was no water in Lauren's lungs to support this theory of her possibly drowning after she rolled into the lake, after falling off this cliff. Now, while dry drowning can sometimes happen, it's very unlikely in this scenario. There was also a very odd triangle impression on the front of Lauren's body. And in this photo, you can see that there is a perfect V and a handle. And Officer Yarchuk had said that anyone who has ever been in a canoe will recognize that this is the canoe's bow or stern, as if someone had laid Lauren's body on a canoe after she was dead, because then lividity sets in and the blood starts to pool and it leaves a marking like that. And Officer Yarchuk says there was only one thing that could make that mark on her abdomen, and it would have been the bow or stern of the canoe. It's a perfect imprint captured on film, and it's indisputable in my mind. It is a key piece of evidence in this case. Now, if that's true, and if she has a mark on her from where the blood pooled from when she was laid post-mortem on a canoe, that means she most likely, and again, this is just in my opinion, she most likely would have had to have been killed up at the campsite on the cliff and then moved into the canoe, taken out to the cove, and dropped her body off in the water. And then they come back, because as though they were trying to plant a scene that she fell off the cliff and rolled into the water on her own. Because there's not much other explanation as to how you would get a marking like that on your body post-mortem, unless, again, her body was laid on a canoe. Plus, if Lauren truly fell off a cliff while wearing her clothes, her little hot pink shorts and her black top, wouldn't there be major scratches and marks all over her body? Wouldn't she have cuts and bruises, blunt force trauma to the head, all of these things that are indicative of a fall down a 30-foot or 90-foot cliff? Wouldn't there also be tons of blood everywhere? Wouldn't her clothing have been ripped from the fall down? But in fact, there were very few marks on Lauren's body. The clothing wasn't ripped. There were very few marks on her. It does not appear as though she's injured from a fall. So these injuries don't match up with a 30 or 90 foot cliff fall. So it doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's not adding up. And why wasn't this called out by the original medical examiner? The private investigator, Sheila, was able to get in contact with Officer Yarchuk, who was also the security guard that evening at the bar when he saw Lauren leaving with her friends at 2 a.m. And as I mentioned, he does not think Lauren's death was an accident. The police that handled Lauren's case severely mishandled the evidence. They failed to secure the crime scene immediately, and they also didn't do any sort of essay kit on Lauren. Now, if there's a 21-year-old who mysteriously goes missing and then turns up dead face down in the water after sharing a hammock with a guy that she barely knew who admitted to having sex with her, he's also a few years older than her, wouldn't one of the most important things be to not only rule those people out as a suspect, but to also make sure that there was no essay that took place? And remember how Chris made it a point to tell the officers that he had sex with Lauren? Which later Hannah had said that Lauren would not have had sex with Chris because she had that boyfriend, Chase, who was waiting for her at home and who they were going to go to that party together with the next night. So all of this is also a big red flag. You have him saying he had sex with her friends saying that would never happen. You have no SA kit taking place. It's just, again, very mishandled from the get-go. What also stands out as a red flag in this case, there were no audio recordings of any of those friends' conversations with the police officers, only their written statements. And when the officers were talking to the friends, they didn't keep the three friends separate. They let them all be there together, not only to corroborate their stories, but to hear each other's versions of events and play off of each other, not isolate them from one another to hear what one has to say to see if there's any discrepancies. They let all three of the friends stay together the entire time. And the 911 call was lost. How does a 911 call get lost? I mean, it is just a complete trash dumpster fire from the get-go here. So Sheila, the PI, decides she's going to conduct some of her own experiments because she wants to get to the bottom of this and figure out how Lauren would have gotten from the bottom of this cliff all the way into that secluded cove. Could she have really floated all of that way? And to everybody's surprise, or I should say not surprise, none of it added up. No matter how the dummy was thrown, flipped, or fell, it would never have hit the water, and it would never have been able to then roll into the water. Sheila also had done experiments to test the current of the water to figure out how Lauren would have floated into that other cove. And those experiments are showing that her body couldn't have ever floated there. It never could have gotten to that location. So how did Lauren get to that cove? Could it have been a canoe? Could somebody have canoed Lauren's body into that cove and then rolled it off the canoe face down into the water? Shortly after Lauren's death, Hannah and her boyfriend Aaron moved to Florida. So Sheila, being the great PI that she is, decides she's going to fly to Florida and she's going to meet with Hannah because she wants to discuss her version of events and revisit what happened that day. Hannah explains to Sheila that she didn't go to seek help to go find Lauren because after she spoke with Chris and Aaron, she assumed that Lauren would just find her way back, that she had wandered off, and that it was fine. However, during that meeting with Sheila, Hannah's phone went off, and it was Aaron who was calling her. And Sheila says that she could hear Aaron's voice on the other line telling Hannah, instructing Hannah to stick to the story. What story were they sticking to? When Aaron got home, he walked straight through that room where Sheila was interviewing Hannah, went right into the back room, and did not say a single word. He then came back into the room with a friend, but he says that he did not want to be recorded. He starts questioning Sheila as to why she's there, what she wanted, and Sheila tells him, I just want the truth for Lauren's family. I want justice for Lauren. Aaron tells her that he talked with one of the detectives, Detective Jeremy Taylor, numerous times, and that they had all even agreed to give a polygraph, and then that the detective had said that it wasn't necessary. So he says, we talked to the detective, we offered a polygraph test, he said it wasn't necessary, so now why are you here? What are you trying to figure out? So then Hannah chimes in, and Hannah says they only want answers, so I'm going to be honest. But no real admission or guilt or anything is stated. With Sheila's work and help, alongside the help of an attorney named Alex Little, Sherry, Lauren's mom, was able to file a wrongful death lawsuit, and she filed a $10 million lawsuit on behalf of her daughter, Lauren. She filed this lawsuit in July of 2016, and she filed it not in hopes of getting that money and getting a single penny of that $10 million, but she filed it in hopes of getting those three people to start talking. She was hopeful that this would be the pressure that they needed to start speaking up and share what happened, but it did the actual opposite, and they all decided to just plead the fifth. All three of them refused to give any information. In fact, during one of those hearings, Hannah refused to answer direct questions, including, did you choke, strangle, or otherwise put your hands around Lauren's neck or throat between the nights of July 24th, that evening that you were together, or the time of her death? Also asking, did you intentionally or accidentally kill Lauren? A total of 154 questions, all to which Hannah refused to answer. Now, those are not hard questions or difficult questions to answer if you are an innocent person. But to not answer 154 questions of that nature, to me, throws up a red flag. In 2017, Hannah ended up filing a summary judgment, and it was granted. A judge ruled that there was not enough evidence for this wrongful death suit against Hannah. However, it was still pending against the two boys. She was then removed ultimately as a defendant from the lawsuit. However, this didn't sit right with Sherry, so she filed an appeal. Now, since that ruling, a witness has come forward, an additional witness that hadn't spoken out previously, and this witness's name is Chris Brown, and he came forward with additional information that might be really important in this case. Chris testified that on the night/early morning of Lauren's death, he and his family had traveled to that same bar and dock center off that lake with some friends. He said that he was standing on the dock, and it was around midnight when he observed a white man swimming towards the dock and eventually climbing out of the water onto the dock. Chris says that the young man appeared extremely distraught and worn out. He apparently spit out water for several minutes before telling Chris and his family that he had almost drowned while trying to swim and search for his friend. Now, Chris said at the time he didn't think much of the incident until he then learned about Lauren's death later that day. He said he simply had a gut feeling that the young man that he saw might have had something to do with it and may have been involved. Well, months later, Chris was discussing Lauren's death with his hairdresser when he was shown some pictures of the group of the four friends, and he immediately says, "That's Aaron." He points out Hannah's boyfriend Aaron as the person he saw that night swimming up to the dock, being distraught, spitting out water, saying he had been trying to swim to search for one of his friends. So if it were Aaron, why was Aaron swimming in the middle of the night, especially when he said that he was sleeping this whole time? What friend was he searching for? I thought he had no idea where Lauren went. What really happened? Could he have been swimming back from a canoe after dropping Lauren off in the cove, after planting evidence and staging a scene? Could that be why he was swimming back to the dock in the middle of the night and why he was distraught? In February 2019, it was announced that the Tennessee Court of Appeals remanded the summary judgment. So this put Hannah back on that defendant list. It put her right back in that lawsuit, right back in that defendant list. And a panel of 3 judges in the appeals court unanimously agreed that that initial judge in the case who had decided to let her get out of this lawsuit had made the wrong decision. However, in an interesting turn of events, in February of 2020, Lauren's mom, Sherry, announced that she was dropping the lawsuit. And the reason why is she says that she believes the podcast that has been created by the private investigator Sheila, and it's called Without Warning, she thinks that that podcast will do more good than this lawsuit will. She says it's clear that the 3 friends aren't willing to speak out at all, but that for her, she just wants to get Lauren's story out there, and that this podcast probably is the best method to do that. She's hopeful that it might bring justice and might bring somebody who saw something that night or heard something during those days or has heard something from the friends since then. She's hopeful it might bring somebody forward. Because remember, we do know Chris loves to talk quite a bit, so perhaps he gloated or perhaps he confided in somebody along the way over the last few years, and maybe new tips will start to emerge.
How has Lauren's death affected you and your family?
Lauren's death has been absolutely devastating to our family. She died 4.5 years ago. It's like she died yesterday. We spent those 4.5 years researching, trying to talk to people, trying to find out what happened to her. We even filed the wrongful death lawsuit to try to get information so we could find out what happened to Lauren. We are at a point right now that we have decided that to pursue the lawsuit in DeKalb County would be a moot point. We're not going to get anywhere in that county at all. So we have decided to drop the lawsuit. We feel that our efforts can be used to fight for Lauren's law. Well, we got to call it something else. I'm sorry, Lauren's law is already taken. But I think our time is better used helping other families and making sure that this doesn't happen again.
Recently, a friend of Lauren's revisited the site of that fateful day, and she recounts what it was like for her and what really happened.
When's the last time you were here?
So it's been a little over 5 years since I've been back to this actual marina. It's kind of weird. Just the fact that I had a friend that passed away here, and that whole weekend was just not something I'd ever want to relive. About right here is where we can climb up to the campsite. All right, so this is the campsite. About right here is where Lauren's hammock was. The theory that is going right now, she woke up in the middle of the night, she fell out of the hammock going to the bathroom, and she stumbled into the water. You can't fall out of this hammock unless the ropes break.
To demonstrate, Cassie brought a hammock similar to the one from that weekend.
And this is your hammock. You just get in, and you're in. Another thing is the marina's right there. You're telling me that no one was awake or no one heard a scream, a yell, a splash? There's no way. I mean, look how many houseboats are out here right now. Just imagine Wakefest. There's twice as many boats here.
The easiest thing about this investigation was there was no investigation. There were so many different inconsistencies with the story, and just being there with Cassie made it even more apparent that something fishy happened. She saw things that were at the campsite from the day they actually camped there.
See the tiki torches?
Yeah.
They're still here.
You believe that those are the same ones from 5 years ago?
You can tell.
It does look exactly like the one in the photo, too.
So to this day, no arrests have been made. Hannah, Aaron, and Chris are living their lives as if nothing ever happened. But where's the justice for Lauren? What happened to Lauren? And I have to be honest with you guys, when I first heard about this story and this case, my mind immediately went to the Amanda Knox case. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. If you're not, Google it. It took place in Italy, and she has been, exonerated. A lot of people believe she was innocent the whole time, while a lot of people also believe she was guilty the whole time. But in any event, my thoughts went immediately to that case. And don't ask me why, but for some reason, as I was going through this case and the details and the, allegations of sexual intercourse, but then the markings on the body, the friend group, my mind just immediately went to the Amanda Knox case. Now, it's just something about the hemorrhaging around Lauren's neck, about the triangle mark. Again, I can't quite pinpoint it, but I can't quite pinpoint it, but something just took me there. And although there is no evidence to suggest that anything like this took place or that it was any sort of sex game or anything weird like that, I can't help but wonder if there are any similarities. And again, there's no real concrete evidence to suggest that. It's just a gut feeling that I can't seem to shake, because I don't know, with all of the evidence we do have and the friends being so secretive, especially the childhood friend Hannah, there's just something that keeps pulling me in that direction. And I could be off base, but let me know what you guys think. For those of you who are familiar with the Amanda Knox case, what do you guys think? And you know what? For those of you who aren't familiar, maybe that's a case I need to go back through and do a deep dive on this channel of, because that was a very, very fascinating case. And I have my own opinions on that case, which I'll save for that video possibly. But educate yourself on that case if you're unfamiliar. But if you are familiar, let me know if you think there are any similarities or if it doesn't ring a bell with you. So overall, I would love to hear your thoughts on this case. Do you think that this was an accident? Do you think that perhaps Lauren was just drinking too much that night at the bar and then she fell off the cliff and this is really what happened? Or do you think that it was a murder that was covered up by this cliff and an accidental fall and drowning? Because remember, those marks from the canoe, post-mortem guys, how did Lauren get those unless she fell off this cliff and rolled off these rocks, rolled into the water, onto a canoe that was docked, landed perfectly on the bow or the stern of the canoe. Then the canoe takes her out to a secluded cove. Then she rolls, after she's already dead, she rolls off that canoe face first into the water. How else could you explain that marking? Seems a lot more plausible to me, at least, that that didn't happen and that somebody killed Lauren at the campsite, went to go dispose of her body, put her on a canoe, and paddled her out to the cove. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. All right, guys, if you have any information on this case or about what happened in the days leading up to this, or anything about Chris or Aaron or Hannah and things they've said, please reach out to Sheila via her podcast. Let her know, give all the tips to Sheila because she is actively still researching this case. I will keep you updated if we hear more information and if more tips emerge. So again, if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button below, subscribe to the channel. Also give this video a thumbs up on your way out. It is a free way to support the channel, and it helps the algorithm at the end of the day too push this story out to more people so that hopefully more people speak up on Lauren's behalf and ultimately we get her justice, which is what we are all here to do. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in with me today. I hope you enjoyed the case. Until the next case, stay safe. Bye.